Bone. Ms. Bone, how you doing? You all right?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
All right, let me check on mine.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and proceed with our budget work session, the first of what might be a few, as we prepare to focus on the 2022 budget pre-submission work session. We know that there have been a number of community conversations, and we're excited about that. I want to thank the administrator for leading those, and the staff that's been out to support them as well. And so you've got a handout that's in front of you on our desk. And I believe that there are a series of key questions that we want to make sure that we try to answer on today so that the administrator can, in fact, proceed with preparing a budget that he'll then submit as the administrator's recommended budget. With that, Administrator Donald, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, Mayor, first, thank you for the opportunity to come before the commission and have these conversations. I think it's important for us to kind of state for the record that we are doing some things differently here as we address the budget. I know in the past, one of the things that I noticed before I started my tenure is that you received an unbalanced budget from the administrator's transmission last year. And because of that, the commission, was able to pass a balanced budget, but you didn't get a long period of time to provide your input. Under the direction of our office in partnership with finance, we've rearranged that completely. So first, you were able to establish your 6 priorities, which we are incorporating into the budget this year. And in addition to that, this pre-work session aligns with the budget calendar where we are requesting some feedback to just see where the commission stands on certain items before providing a transmission. In that way, we should be able to easily approve our budget ahead of publicly stated deadlines. And that's always my intent, is to do things ahead of schedule and under budget. And so the purpose of today's meeting is to kind of jumpstart us in doing that. So there are 4 key areas in which I am looking for feedback so that we can ensure to have these things included in the budget. The first, the commission has made it fairly public and given me clear direction that you want to consolidate our maintenance operations. As we've looked at that, there are some key areas and key findings that I think make it easier, but we want to consider that and bring it before the commission. The second, I think I've made a pretty public request that to make the 311 operations stronger than what they are now, I'm recommending transitioning their reporting structure through the administrator's office. And so this won't be the first time that you heard that, but I want to really be clear on what the benefits are of that and what the impact is. The third piece is we've talked about having a pay in class study, which again, is something that's pretty clear and everyone understands, but making sure that there are certain adjustments that we have to look at, and they may occur outside of the normal budget process and before the pay in class study is complete, because we've got to make sure that we don't lose all of our talent, especially around infrastructure. The final piece is that we have a broad plan for the American Rescue Plan, but there are some gaps in the budget. So while we'll have a balanced budget, right now we're trying to fit in an estimated additional $8 million in cost request in a budget that we intended to be flat. And so as we look at that, we want to make sure that we get key responses and key decisions from the commission. And let's see, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be using my clicker, but making sure it works. Okay, and so again, those 4 items are listed there for you here just for the edification of the public. So I'll start with consolidating maintenance operations. So we presented this visual for you, and our member, the commissioner from the 8th, almost laughing us out of the building because our operations for maintenance specific to downtown are spread across about 6 different areas of operations. And so the commission would like for those areas to be consolidated a little bit. Now, I'm leaving this illustration there. You've received it in writing before and you have it in your packets, but as you'll see, it's extremely spread out, and it is a mixture of both contract as well as staff labor. And I think what we've identified is that the operations are just a little bit mix and match in lieu of having streamlined operations. And so here is simply just a summary of how we believe we can have a cleaner version of providing services in the downtown area. And so I won't go deep into that, but just showing you that this maintenance plan really defines how we would deliver service. And then there are other considerations that are happening. I think you know that the Augusta Tomorrow group has their CADI plan, also been pretty straightforward with the commission and public that because of the American Rescue Plan, we can allocate some additional support to our partners at the DDA who can kind of help to either augment some of those efforts or carry them out in collaboration with our team.
All right, so I know typically we try to wait until the presentation, but I think just to be thoughtful as we move forward today, you'll take questions and motions. So my intent
is after each section to pause.
Okay.
After each section. So we're on the consolidated maintenance, and then we'll pause and get some insights, and then we'll go through to the next.
All right, I think they're good with that.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And so, again, this is an illustration because of the environment in which we deliver information where everything becomes public. Some of these numbers are intentionally not accurate, so let me make sure that I say that because I don't want to see something in the newspaper or in the blogs that say, hey, it's going to cost us $80 million more to maintain downtown. Definitely not the intent, and so we didn't use those type of numbers, but these are for illustration purposes only, so I want to make sure that I highlight that. But the consolidation of those efforts to have them focused and split across a single service area is the key intent that trying to eliminate to the commission. So I'll go through that here in a second. So the first thing is this is just a reference map of how to address downtown maintenance. And so here you've got Broad Street and Green Street, 5th through 15th. 13th through 15th is currently managed by, I think it's Kendricks or whatnot, and so those types of external relationships are already included in here. You've got your Broad Street downtown corridor, and then you also have your downtown Cedar Grove Cemetery, Eastview Cemetery, as well as Magnolia, which we currently are coordinating now. Depending on the direction that we go, if you were to consolidate and take this away from multiple departments and put it under one, basically creating a new division or augmenting an existing department or division, it is likely with this new consolidation, we may need a facility. And so while we're still working through the process, we've looked at that, and so there's already a facility at 302 Watkins Street that could be basically a subdivision office of whichever department this effort was placed in. And so there might, if so, we'd have to identify about $400,000 in cost. The second thing is to, as we make some decisions, the things that we're evaluating is that some of the allocations or however we would resolve this would actually be temporary, because in your TIA in your TIA allocation, there are already some Augusta downtown road improvement projects that are moving through the process. And so that would actually change the way we deliver service and what our downtown looks like. So that's just important, which is,
Can you flip the screen?
oh, I'm sorry. I'm just talking. There we go. And so just highlighting that some of the changes that we're talking about making are going to be resolved through TIA funding. So, you know, the projects related to Broad Street and Green Street are already under design in this year. And so the let date is of the third quarter of next year, where some of the construction and change would come. So we're identifying what the prorated cost would be. Is there really a need to permanently consolidate, or do you transition some of your existing personnel costs that you may have in vacancies to contract costs to maintain in the interim of the actual services that will be provided through TIA? So some of the things, just so you'll know, and I know that they align perfectly with some of the concerns that have been expressed with maintaining this area, you've actually already made some decisions to resolve them. So we're trying to take care of this in the interim. So you've got improvements that include the replacement of those existing landscape mediums with new hardscape and landscape zones. And so that work will include some of the tree removal issues that we've talked about and the replacement, as well as some existing tree trimming and park features related to, you know, sitting benches and things of that nature at Broad Street. Same thing, we've had some challenges with those fountains, and so some of those will be removed and the other fountains would not be installed. So before we put $100,000 in renovating fountains, we want to think about that, knowing that in the third quarter, some of those things might change. So we know about the water feature at James Brown, as well as replacing some of the parking grades, because those will be blended in with the landscape. So as we talk about our maintenance of downtown, we don't want to over-invest, knowing that the TIA project or TIA projects for downtown will be coming forward. As we look at it, what we've been considering is leveraging our in-house forces, which would basically have us either take advantage of existing vacancies where we might freeze those at the end of this year so that we can realign them going into the new budget, or leveraging, adding additional funding for contracts and things of that nature. Option B is kind of the existing formula, but centralizing those activities to where you have some contract services and in-house forces. So we're looking at those things currently as we go through the process. And I will tell you, the two most sensible departments to be able to coordinate this would be engineering and central services, because they deliver a variety of these services. And of course, engineering is already managing our TIA activities. In looking, and this is, even though I knew that I was going to state that this is for illustration purposes, again, because of our environment, I wanted to double down and make sure it's on the slide that this is not what the proposal is. It's just highlighting that, you know, you would have an existing director in whatever department and you would simply be adding the services. It could be a single or multiple contracts, or that hybrid model that we talked about. And so another thing to think about is, as you look at downtown maintenance and all of those things, our partners in our division at Keep Augusta Beautiful really needs to be involved, because I think that's a key underutilized asset, and that's why there's a dotted line between the department and that organization, to make sure we don't forget them, whether the funding source is in a different place or if it would be the desire of the commission to align them with this effort. And so that is it for that piece. And I guess my solid ask and what I'm looking for in direction there is, in considering what is upcoming for TIA, would it be more of the desire of the commission. I think you've already said you want a full city cleanup, leveraging our rescue plan funds to really beautify our entire, and I'm saying city, but our entire county, to make sure that we are street sweeping, cleaning right-of-ways, improving infrastructure, all of those things. That's clear. It's a one-time cost, and we've got to maintain it. But specific to downtown, where some of those challenges were really kind of exacerbated recently, are we looking at more of a one-year fix that we would have this augmentation placed under the appropriate division to maintain those interim activities until construction? Or do we want to try to address this problem in advance by creating a hybrid of people and contracts within a division to address, in my opinion, address things that we won't really know how it fits until after the TIA projects are done, but looking for that guidance from the commission.
Thank you for that, Administrator Donald. And again, I want to echo what I said earlier in terms of the work that's been put into not only this presentation, but behind the scenes. I'm going to recognize the commissioner from the 8th first, but I'll say this. I'm going to step away for a moment, then I'll come back. But as we talk about this global issue of maintenance, what I want to caution us on is for us to relegate that to just being, quote, making sure that we're keeping the right-of-ways cut and the typical highways and byways. This issue of maintenance is a global one, and it needs to address the broader parameters of not just cleanliness and beautification. So as you think about how to stage this from a department perspective, I want you to think about the ongoing day-to-day operations of a city our size and growing that transcend, let's just make sure we keep it clean for folks in that area. So I'll qualify my comments with that, and then I'll come back. Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 8th, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem in my absence.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for the administrator. So going back to the very first slide that you showed about the Exhibit 1 Downtown Augusta Maintenance Plan and Exhibit 2 Downtown Augusta Maintenance Plan reference map, I'm seeing a lot of items here where it's talking, cleaning parking bays, cleaning sidewalks, things like that. Have you coordinated at all with the ACE program that started on the 1st of this month? Because, one of the things that's being funded through that private investment is pressure washing all the sidewalks from 13th Street to 5th Street, cleaning sidewalks on a daily basis, trash pickup. I guess what I'm really concerned about is focusing so much of our energy on things that are already getting done by private investment.
Absolutely have. I've been in talks with them actually before they launched the program. And so those items are actually included in here. And so there may not be funds allocated to those things. And again, this is an illumination, but that's why I mentioned that and I'm saying the name wrong, but the Kendrick Group, we inserted that in here to highlight that they maintain those right-of-ways. It's also why I mentioned that we've already talked about allocating over $1 million in partnership with the DDA so they could potentially augment that effort and support that ACE and CADI program. So again, I believe they have limited funding to be able to carry that out for a short period of time, but the rescue plan funds would be able to allow us to provide that quick strike that we've been talking about. So have we coordinated with them? Absolutely. But when we look at it, just want to look at it globally. So,
I just wanted to highlight that because, it's a big program. I mean, I think it's $250,000 that private investors have made into, taking care of that downtown corridor. So, really what I'm hoping to focus that on is, you've got $250,000 that you could allocate to other parts of the county instead of just downtown? Cause
Yep. Well, I want to give you a reminder because I know we had talked about this, but of that allocation that we're talking about, I think, and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe I proposed through the rescue plan about $1.5 million. That was the earmark. We haven't submitted a plan, haven't gotten that far yet, but assuming that we did, a portion of that we would give to the DDA. They could partner with ACE, they could do whatever, because remember, we couldn't partner directly with a private entity to do that in a non-competitive fashion, so we wouldn't want to get involved with that. But the remainder of those funds are actually countywide. That's the proposal, and so we would allocate those funds again to this division or whoever it was to be able to carry that out.
Okay, and then looking towards your Exhibit 3, this new organizational chart, it looks like there's a lot of new hires that would need to take place, including this contract manager and external maintenance manager. Am I wrong there? Or?
Yes, illustration purposes only, and that's why that's there at the bottom. I would ignore that. It's just highlighting that whichever model you want to go with, the key is existing division, tie it to keep Augusta beautiful, and then
I have questions there too. The keep Augusta.
Which one would you like me to answer first?
Well, go ahead and finish
Okay.
with the explanation of the
So
chart.
the point is that you would have an existing director bring this on as a new responsibility because it's not consolidated right now. Spread across multiple. So the key piece is existing director carry it on. If you were to bring these on as, let's say, a contract effort, you need a contract manager because you're adding a new responsibility. They need resources. If you were to do a hybrid, you would likely need a lead because there wouldn't be one right now, and then you could take existing vacancies and plug them under that. So if you wanted to try to address it, if your preference is to be more contract heavy because the TIA allocation, ACE, all of these things are coming forward, you need the contract manager and potentially a lead, and you make it all contract. If you want a hybrid to make it more long-term and sustainable, then you would have to add positions. And so the direction that you prefer is what the question is.
Why can contract and labor not be long-term and sustainable?
What's your funding source? Or let me say this.
The same as it
well,
would be
it's
if
not
you're-
to say it's not sustainable. Let me say that differently. Leveraging TIA, if we know that that's coming forward, we don't know what the maintenance requirements are going to be because it's not complete. We've got historical data that says, hey, we've got 62 fountains that need to be maintained. But through this TIA, still currently in design, that 62 might go down to 13. So contract labor or doing it in a contract fashion for this year allows you to cut the contract and those expenses and then reevaluate when the project is complete. But you're going to have some maintenance that you've got to maintain downtown. And so the hybrid option, if that's what we look at, we can be thoughtful and responsible. But that's a decision of the commission, and I'm trying to get feedback today versus submitting a budget, and then we only have 22 days to figure it out.
Well, I'll counter your question with what's your funding mechanism to hire or to use county labor?
Yeah, so I think if we were to do it via contract, I think we'd be able to offset some of those costs with the American Rescue Plan and be able to address it. We would also likely be able to address it with county labor by either rearranging new positions or looking at how the contracts expire and then readjusting those funds. The only difference is for each person that you add, you're adding that cost in perpetuity unless you're going to RIF or defund in a future budget. And so that's the difference, knowing that we're taking on that liability. If county labor is the piece that the commission prefers, we can surely take care of that and likely maintain it while we have the American Rescue Plan.
All I can say is I see far more contract maintenance folks cutting grass in the rain and bad weather than I do county folks. So, I'm just going to let it be clear that my my preference is to contract as much of the maintenance out as possible. That way it frees up resources to, to do the programming and other things that we really need to concentrate on.
Well received, and so I think again, it's great and clear, direct from a single commissioner. But my question again, I think that's great, and so if that's consensus amongst the commission, I think we would have our directives, and I would know how to address it during the budget formulation, which we're doing now. If not,
And
then.
do you have a cost comparison? I mean, of the two models?
So I think we're working through that now, not fully, but what we would do, just to be honest with you, is we're looking at what is available currently, and we'd allocate it. We're going to allocate it within the budget regardless. And what I mean by that, if there's $2.5 million that we project annually that we can cover, and I'm not, for the record, I'm not saying that it costs $2.5 million, have to super reiterate that here. But if it were, using that as an example, then if that cost is $2.5 million, then we would look at it and create a model that is funded to that level. And so it's not necessarily going to be a cost comparison, it's going to be an efficiency evaluation. So,
All right, thank you.
All right, you
Yes,
good?
sir.
You sure?
I'll be back.
Mr. Frainer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. My first question is that all the tasks on Exhibit 1 that you see here, are they completed by the Exhibit 3? Like basically all of those would fall under the department?
the one specific to downtown, yes.
So all of that would fall under your,
Division.
if we did that?
That's right.
So would you not take the funds from each one of those departments?
Not necessarily. So, listen, just have a frank conversation and say, right now there's enough funding everywhere, but it's not appropriately being carried out or carried out to the desires of the public, the commission, and in many instances our staff. So, I'll use parks for example. Currently, they manage the 3 cemeteries, and that was a big concern because it's extremely labor intensive. This proposal would shift that responsibility to this division that would hold it, but they still have other responsibilities where their maintenance staff needs to maintain the parks, and so it would actually help elevate them. If they had 3 vacancies, though, those 3 vacancies would follow this division.
I got you.
But you wouldn't want to gut them completely because
No,
they still
but
have parks, grounds.
If you're taking a lot of their work, then they shouldn't have the same staff levels as they currently have, though. That's the. As for me, like I'm looking at a long-term solution. I think. I mean, the American Rescue money is great, but at the end of the day, it's a few years, and it's definitely something that we need to make sure that we are focused on to sustain the maintenance of. My second question, and I guess you really can't answer it, but based on the positions that you see are unfilled, and with this spreadsheet here, like, is there any estimate of additional resources that are going to be needed? Percentage, 10%, where you're at 50, you might be at 50%, you might be at. I mean, I'm not asking you to quote numbers. I'm just trying to get my head around what that looks like if we were to create a new division.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at it more holistically, not just here. So outside of completely incorporating these changes that we're going to go over today and that kind of identified as priorities, we're looking at about $8 million that we've got to cut, realign, and readjust. And so to get us to our balanced budget. As we look at that, is there an increased cost, or do we solely leverage the current budget? So if there's $15 million that's associated with maintenance, when we cut these other priorities or when we augment these other priorities, do we just leave that $15 million as the budget and reallocate it, or are these other things expressed as the commission that, well, I'm not sure, even if they're asking for $5 million, which we'll talk about here later, they're asking for $5 million, I don't recommend that we give $5 million. I recommend that we give $3 million, and those other $2 million, you figure out these other priorities. And
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far yet. That's why I'm looking for this input so
Right.
that we can make those decisions in our recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Administrator Donald, piggybacking off of what my colleague from the 8th said, contract versus city labor. I think when we contract it out, we'll probably get a better bargain for the taxpayers of the city because we contract it out for a solid price, and then the contractor takes up all liability of benefits, liabilities of all sorts, and the citizens don't have to pay that bill. I'm a little disappointed that none of the fountains are in the budget to be put back downtown because, you know, our ex-colleague Marion Williams loved the fountains as most of us do. So I'm a little disappointed in that. But the thing going forward, I can understand not spending a lot of big money on the big ticket items in downtown. But at the same time, we've got things down there that does need to be repaired that is a big liability that the city is taking by leaving them unrepaired. We've got holes in the sidewalk, we've got broken curves, we've got cement plates that are off of the end of the center medians. I mean, we've just got a lot of maintenance that needs to be fixed because it would end up being a liability. So how can we address that?
You mean, well, so I'm looking at I've got a comment for you on the fountains piece, but that second question, if you could rephrase that for me or repeat that for me.
You're talking about the
You said how
broken
could
curves,
we fix?
the concrete.
Uh-huh.
We've got a lot of holes in the sidewalks that, you know, even down on Riverwalk, you can walk it and there's absolutely missing pieces of concrete that people are going to be looking to step in and sue the city of Augusta. And we need to have that and those areas addressed last year. Mm-hmm. So we need those addressed now, and we need it in an emergency fashion. How can we address that now and, you know, going forward?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I want to make sure that I kind of keep us tempered on some of these items. So, one, the commission has made it pretty clear that we want to address some of those issues, and so I want you to assume that the budget and some of the recommendations we're bringing forward resolve those issues. This is the focus of unresolved issues in the budget that we're looking for guidance for. So when you look at what's coming for TIA, I don't know about the decisions related to the fountains and the things that you highlighted, but that's on, I think we're talking about Broad Street, but you will get that additional group of fountain features that you approved when you proposed TIA. And then secondly, that again addresses Broad Street and not Green Street. So those are just adjustments that you're making. Also, when you go into construction related to how these items are redesigned, some of those road and sidewalk features, even those parking spaces, are going to be redone. So that's a part of how you correct those issues. It's a part of your TIA plan. And so I'm not addressing those things that have been resolved because they've been resolved. We will be bringing forward with the budget a plan to resolve those things. But what is unresolved is mainly contract versus hybrid versus county labor, and secondly, which area would the commission prefer that this service be done, knowing that your administrator is looking closely at engineering and central services as candidates.
Okay, I got all of that, and I understand that. Moving forward, it's going to be resolved. My question is, until we move forward, why can't we get it fixed now some of the things that we need to have repaired now.
So what's the funding source? So that's the purpose of this exercise. So maybe I need to back up because I think we're having multiple conversations. So one, you've got the American Rescue Plan. Two, you've advised me to look at budget amendments. Three, you've asked me to look at SPLOST overages and how we can reallocate those funds. All of those activities are in play. But your budget plan is your central plan for what you're going to do in FY22. When you answer the questions for how we address FY22, we can now use all of those other floating funding activities to say, great, we know what we're going to do in FY22. All of those are resolved. We still have these holes. So now we've got overages from SPLOST 7, and so now we can take $600,000 and plug in a hole here for this allowable activity. We've got the rescue plan funds. While they don't allow you to do X, they do allow you to do Y. And so now we can plug that in. But the central decisions that have to be made are around the FY22 budget, and it's the first domino that allows us to address the rest.
Okay, you good?
You know, I still didn't get an answer to what I asked, but thank you.
Well, I think any of us, if we see something that's wrong, that we can go and take a look at it and request that, they take care of it, whether we have the money or not, so.
Yeah. Well, I want to, I don't want to miss the point here because I want to make sure. So again, I just want to make sure that's clear, and if it's not,
Mr. Administrator,
yeah.
I do, you said one thing that's true. You're having two different conversations. You're talking about the budget, and then he's talking about things you can fix now. So
Correct.
That's two different conversations.
Yeah, and I guess part of what I'm saying is the plan is to resolve as many things in FY21 as possible or shortly thereafter. I'll just give you a great example. In SPLOST, you will end collections for SPLOST 7 on the 31st of December. When you end that, you'll have projects that have not fully been completed that you have to resolve. You might have additional collections and things of that nature. That means that those funds would be available for you to make a decision, or a recommendation would be made on how to allocate and resolve those issues. Let's say potholes, right? Let's say potholes is a huge issue because that's what Commissioner Clark was talking about. So if SPLOST 7, once we allocate all of the funds for existing projects that you have to bring forward to the public, and let's say you had an additional $1 million in collections, we could then propose to the commission, hey, let's do a pothole palooza. We're going to collect all of the potholes around the entire county. We're going to get a list of them, and we're going to allocate these funds, and over these 4 weekends, we're going to resolve that problem. That's an easy problem to fix if in the budget you have filled in all of your holes and you know what direction you're going in, because now those SPLOST dollars don't have to go to existing infrastructure issues like fixing downtown. And so if we can get the right directions on how to fix downtown in the FY22 budget, I can then say, hey, the plan to resolve your pothole issue is Pothole Palooza, which we're going to fund here. Did that answer that question?
I think so, but we're being long. Mr. Mason?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm trying to stay on task here. Mr. Administrator, as I'm looking at this Exhibit 3, which is talked about the proposed external maintenance organizational chart.
Yes, sir.
My first question would be, I think I heard you say that would potentially fall up underneath traffic and engineering?
Well, under engineering or central services as a department.
Engineering or central services. Okay, so as far as what I'm looking at here, it would appear to me that contract services would be something that would be most beneficial. You have an opportunity, depending on what type of contract vehicle you want to use. You could even throw some incentives in there as well. if need be, to make sure that we reach the milestones or those areas that we really want to, those targeted areas that we want to reach. But also, if we're talking about a FY22, then that after we assess after that year, we can make that assessment after action review, what have you, and make that determination. Or you could do it with multiple years, a base and an option for the government to make that determination as to whether what we want to do moving forward. Wouldn't require you to add any new staff in terms of the departments, right? Because we're going to pull that from the contract vendor potentially if we went that way, right? So that's just from my observation and experience, which you may not be familiar with, but I've worked 8 years in contracting out at Fort Gordon. So utilizing a contract in that particular manner may be the best option. And would that come underneath your what you're calling the hybrid?
Yeah, so a hybrid, you would still have to have a contract manager, which would be your staff.
Absolutely, and
so
lead.
It would be a blend of contract and staff. Yeah.
Under that hybrid, would it require hiring of new staff?
I think what we would prefer is to look at those existing vacancies, even though it may not be a ton of those, and you would just move those. You might say you've got 10 vacancies at grade 15, but you could transition that to 6 grade 8s and 2 grade 12s or something. I'm just making something up, but it would be a different mix than what you currently have now.
So currently, under central services or engineering, is there dedicated staff for downtown right now?
I believe some of them serve that, but remember, you also have parks as well. So parks is carrying out a lot of these activities. Central services just mainly does our facilities, and then some of those beautification efforts are kind of split between AED and utilities, so the fountains and things of that nature. So it's spread out everywhere.
Okay, so just so I'm kind of clear here, kind of get an idea of where we're going. There had to have been some sort of what I would consider a triggering event that has caused the need for this consolidation, potential consolidation, correct?
Well, I think what it is that through COVID, and I want to make sure we highlight that, especially since some of this we will resolve through American Rescue Plan funds, is that through COVID and the increased burden on your infrastructure and especially your downtown, the beautification efforts just have not been up to par based on what we would like and what we expect. And so that's one thing. But also back in 2011, when the public works department was split, the responsibilities were spread out across a variety of departments. And so the exacerbation on our services from COVID-19, as well as just the growth and change of focus in departments, is what has brought this directive up from the commission.
So in your professional opinion, experience that you had previously, I know it's not your decision, but what would you, where would you propose or recommend in this situation?
Yeah, so I think we would do what I would prefer to do with the consensus of the commission is evaluate those existing vacancies. Any of them that don't have an action on them by, let's say, mid-November are swept, and are actually likely by the end of this month. They are swept, mean frozen and potentially taken away to be reallocated in FY22, meaning by contract or position. And then we would have that hybrid model where a lot of it is contract, and those contract positions could either continue on, or if you see a change in service, you could cut the contract.
I guess my only issue moving forward is we know the American Rescue Plan funds are only going to last for so long.
That's right.
That's first and foremost. I'm looking for more of a long-term solution at the end of the day, because we've got to do something different than what we're doing right now, no question about that. And in addition to that, and I know we're talking about downtown, but you've got a whole south, east, and everywhere else that's going to be wondering what's going on. And yeah, imagine that, right? So that's just something we've got to keep that in mind, because we hear it all the time as commissioners. You're talking downtown, 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 downtown. What about us out here? You know, and so that's something that I want to keep in mind. But that I'm more interested in that long-term deal and how we're going to operate that. And where that money would actually come from.
Got it.
That's extremely important to note. I know we may have to do something in the short term. I understand that, but
Well, and I would say if and kind of hearing this feedback from the commission, the one thing that we could do is that as we look at this, while our funds for the American Rescue Plan expire at a certain period of time and we have to obligate those, knowing that there is ACE and knowing that there is the Downtown Development Authority that could then partner elsewhere, what we allocate to the DDA could basically be given with the directive to maintain downtown for that period. And then those excess funds, which would kind of be permanent or whatnot, could be used to basically take care, or the responsibility could shift from us maintaining downtown to that external party maintaining it, and then we leverage our funds to be responsible for the rest of the county outside of downtown. And it kind of sounds like, from the comments that I've heard, while that may not be the full look, something similar to that is what you want to see. Is we know we've got to handle downtown, allocate the funds, and what I mean by that is if it costs Group X $500,000 a month or $500,000 a year to maintain downtown, we could allocate those funds in a one-time transaction, let's say to the DDA, and then they're able to maintain downtown for the next 4 or 5 years, because they don't have the same constraints that we have. So received and noted from all of the commissioners.
Mr. Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Minister, I want to kind of come right in where you just mentioned about the DDA. Historically, if you don't mind, Ms. Bonner, somebody can correct me on this, Mr. Administrator, and that is the DDA, when it came to cleaning up downtown, they were involved with the caddy program. And the caddy program was where the owners, about 51% of the property owners who own the most property, it could be a one owner that could own 90% of the property down there, but 50% of that ownership, they would agree to, to a tax increase to themselves. And the last time I think they did that, they might have generated close to $400,000. With that, the DDA managed that, and they had their own personal staff to do that. It wasn't, could do it in an extra job, but they had some sense of security, some sense of cleanup and things of that nature. But what I'm hearing you say now is actually allocate money to the DDA. And I'm trying to find out, if you're saying you're going to hire contractors over here, is that for the DDA to do to hire these contractors?
No. So based on that conversation that we were just having, and so I wouldn't call out the caddy program or ACE or whoever, because remember, we can't just go directly to them without procurement and all of that good stuff. Now the DDA could choose whoever they would like. And so my thought is that if there are efforts related to downtown and our authority that coordinates downtown on our behalf, we can allocate funds to them. They could partner with ACE, they could partner with Caddy, they can partner with John Gresham and whoever else it is to deliver that service downtown. That is that allocation, and I would, again, just leave that there. But our contractual services, hybrid or whatever it is, would then be, after that allocation is done, which you could fully do through the American Rescue Plan, now our burden is to coordinate those activities outside of downtown.
Yeah, because so has there been any talk about the DDA, to your knowledge,
We
going back to
have.
the caddy program and doing it that way in terms of the business owners accepting that burden, and we kind of contribute something to that as opposed to us
Yes.
giving that organization $500,000 to $1 million.
Yes, but again, it would be through the DDA.
Yeah,
yes, but yes, I think there's a, not I think, I know that there's a very strong interest to that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do we get a bang for our buck? Because at that point, we could. I really don't like that plan. I really don't. Me personally, because what we do, if you got to say a group like Augusta Tomorrow for a year or two wants to fund the cleanup of Augusta, and then we take and we give $500,000 to $1 million to the DDA, then we have moved beyond being able to procure that service, because, like you said, they can get to this to a vendor in a much shorter way than we can, and that may not be beneficial to the average small business or something like that, because they can practically handpick who they want. I'm not sure that's the way that I would want to go with that.
So I don't disagree with you, but I would just say that we've got to make some decisions, and we've got limited resources. And so with limited resources, sometimes it's that whole, and I wouldn't want to call it evils, but that lesser of two evils. When you balance the benefit, the key is how do we deliver the most robust public service, period.
Well,
and when I look at that, I think you've got to kind of offset your cost and insulate some of those costs. And that may mean providing the resources to an external entity who can get it done. But I do hear you loud and clear, but in the recommendation that I'm going to bring forth, I'm going to take all of this feedback into consideration. But my recommendation, which will only be a recommendation, is going to be in evaluating what all 10 of you have commented, what is best in my professional opinion with the limited amount of resources we have.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So let me look at the existing organization. And for illustration purposes only, I clearly get that. But when you have the existing director and the directors that you've pretty much mentioned, most notably has been Central Services, most notably. But when you look at Keep Augusta Beautiful, that is up under Environmental Services, and I don't know what their contract manager look like. So my question would be, would we potentially remove Environmental Service from down there and bring in Keep Augusta Beautiful to potentially be this manager per se over this process, because that's what we are talking about, the beautification of all of Augusta. So we bring a new player to the forefront and not let them be second and third fiddle, and not have where they can execute what we all want, and that's a beautiful city.
So augmenting Keep Augusta Beautiful. Now, I'll tell you, I haven't looked at that. I looked at that as a group that has the ability to help us support and augment and lead some of those things, so you just don't want to leave them out. So that's what that dotted line signifies is, hey, we want to know that we have this resource, but making them the division that actually coordinates this is actually something I had not thought of. I only thought of looking at those two departments only, but that's a new thought that, yeah, so I've got some light bulbs going off, and I hadn't thought about it like that. So if that's something that the commission is interested in, I could definitely look at that.
Okay, well,
don't
look
know
at that, because that's what they will be doing. I mean, that's all they do. I mean, they go across town. I think Commissioner Scott has been involved with several cleanups, and I think you may have something in the very near future. Commissioner Mason got coming up on the 16th and others and things, and that organization has been constant. So they may, come to the forefront when we're talking about the beautification of all of Augusta, to try to utilize them for that's just my opinion there.
Well, can I get some feedback from that on the commission and looking at that? Is that something that, I mean, no decisions made because we do have to evaluate it and a recommendation come forward, but is that something that we should look at in considering them as well, or just keeping it to engineering and or central services as an option?
Well, that's where they are now, and we sitting up here trying to figure out what we're going to do different, and that's not to slight either one of those, because those are our most high profile, and actually will keep the city running.
Yeah.
You know, so there's not, and so many times, some of the things I believe we do, we got them doing what we consider things that cutting weeds and bushes and stuff really is kind of downgrade for what we really expect of them. So we ought to try to remove those burdens off of them, in my mind, and let them do what they do best. And let's keep the city running from that point and let an organization like entity like Keep Augusta Beautiful, let it become the garden city that we're capable of doing. That just means I'm going to leave that alone because you did want some feedback from my colleagues on that.
Yeah, just
Can we
I got
move?
some.
Can we move?
But I'm
forward?
not through. I got one more question, Commissioner. Mr.
You got another question?
Well, I got one more. I'll wait. Go ahead.
yeah,
I'll
can we
pass
get
on.
some feedback on that?
I'll
That
pass
just
on.
gives some good
All right.
marching orders.
All right, hang on a second. Mr. Garrett.
Thank you. Told you I'd have more. All right. So you asked for some input on Keep Augusta Beautiful. They don't have a staff. I mean, there's two or three people in that office. So they can't handle this type of work. I mean, really, when we do cleanups across the city, all they do is help us organize volunteers. So to use them as an entity to come in and manage a program like this, I think if anything, it's a supplement, but I think we need to lean on our engineering director, our central services director, Parks and Rec, to help centralize this more. I'm not sure where Keep Augusta Beautiful really fits in other than the volunteer side.
Put all those people up under them.
Hang on a second. Mr. Garrett, are you finished?
I am not.
and I'm-
So
And
Hang on,
Commissioner
Mr.
Garrett
Garrett.
and all commissioners, you don't have to vote on anything today. It's not a deep fight. It's just allowing me to get feedback from the commission and make a recommendation that I believe all of you would easily be able to say yes to. So
okay.
you can have competing ideas, and that's welcome because, again, I'll work to read the room and bring back something that's collaborative.
And during this conversation, just in this first part, and we're an hour into this already.
Yeah.
I keep hearing, we're supposed to be having a budget conversation for our county funds, but we're also interjecting American Rescue Plan funds into a solution. Those are limited resources. They're only going to be around for 3 more years. So, to me, I'm not sure if we should be mixing them the way that this conversation has gone.
Yeah, I disagree, and I'll tell you why. So some of those funds, and I will tell you, some of your actions are going to be handled in perpetuity. You make a decision, you got to carry those costs forward for as long as you have a government or as long as this is your model. But there are other things that are going to happen that are temporary, and so the American Rescue Plan are like bridge funds. So there might be startup and equipment costs and things of that nature. You also are having some projected losses that you won't carry after the American Rescue Plan expires. I'll give you an example. Our losses related to the masters have been significant, but those won't last forever. And a reason you can utilize the American Rescue Plan for some of these activities that bridge the gap, and some of the reason you have those gaps is because of those type of losses. We're going to get to some of that later in the presentation, and I'll discuss it in detail. But this question isn't necessarily about money. It's about service structure, and then we're going to identify the money. But
Okay.
the service structure is vital in
Okay,
that.
all right, let me jump in here. Ms. Bonner? Ms. Bonner, did you have anything?
Oh, no, sir. I was just saying he was asking for consensus in order to give him authority to move forward.
Okay,
These ideas, so that's all you all will be doing today.
I got
And-
you.
and I think
Hang on just a second. Mr. Hassan, did you have anything else? No, sir. All right, you good. So, Mr. Administrator, you need a consensus on moving
Well,
forward with this?
I think for this one, it's just feedback, and the feedback is, look, we still don't want, even with the challenges, whatever the additional money, coordination, whatever it is, we don't want to leave it the same. We do want something different. The 2 divisions that seem to have the most support or coordination is engineering and central services. And then the second piece of that is limit cost as much as possible, but there is some consensus that we need to augment with county staff, but also limit long-term cost by having a contract services portion. That's what I got from this conversation. If that's
Okay.
wrong,
All right, hang on, Mr. Frayner.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, I think, with everything you said there. The long-term solution, the hybrid model. So, I'm sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
You all right?
Yes, sir.
I was about to ask for consensus.
No, go ahead.
So I guess in the two departments that you mentioned, I mean, so I kind of like to ask for consensus based on what you said, understanding that the contract piece of it is part of it too, knowing that, you know, we can't hire everybody tomorrow, but we start with that because we have to do better than we've been doing. So that's kind of what I would ask for.
Okay, Mr. Mason, you had something?
Yes. I'm almost there with you. I'm almost there with you. Environmental services,
I mean, engineering.
engineering, and central services. But the new staff, I'm not quite there yet.
Okay.
Now that contracting services, I think, is a must because, for many reasons. One, what Commissioner Clark mentioned before, we've got to do something a little different than what we've been getting, and maybe that contract services is going to be our best option. They're a little bit more motivated, maybe, to get these things done to a standard that would be appropriate. So I am with you with everything that you're talking about, but that it's more of a contract basis than the new staff. That's what I have in my head.
Got it.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Okay, let's move forward.
All righty. So next piece, transitioning 311. This is just simply looking right now. You know, you've established this June of 2016. Office currently consists of 7 staffers. Right now, Augusta 311 takes all of the calls related to the non-emergency city services, you know, roadway potholes, inoperable street lights, and missed trash collection. Prior to 2017, you actually had a real limited amount of time for your 311, and today you've extended those and you're 7 to 7. The utilities department, though, actually has some additional staff, and it operates out of Wiles Road, and you know their calls are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so one of the things that working with those 2 directors, one of the areas that they are looking at is kind of combining those call centers to augment 311 and really make it a 24/7 operation. And so there are a couple of ways that we think we can do that, and there are a couple of key services that are key tools that are available. The one challenge, though, is how would you house those? And so we're looking at potentially through the budget process combining where those folks sit at to make sure we can coordinate a 24/7 operation where we either expand this Wiles Road or we plug folks in the municipal building. And so that's just something that we're looking at, is a consolidation where we can kind of bring those folks together and expand it to a 24/7 type of operation, and then aligning it under the administrator's office would allow that enforcement that is right now. If someone from 311 is calling, they're kind of isolated and they're under central services, but everyone is pretty clear that the administrator's office is a direct line to the commission. So if service responses and things of that nature don't occur, then they're not occurring on the behalf of the commission. And so that change would give it more teeth.
All right, Mr. Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Administrator, so if this happens for you here, you want this, January 1?
Well, we would have the authority January 1, but we may not complete a full transition until maybe a month or so later. But we would start preparing for those type of activities prior to, yes, sir.
Okay. And just for the record, and I apologize because I didn't quite hear you, I was in a little sidebar conversation, so that's on me. But I would like to say, for the record, tell me, in making this transition, what do you want the government to benefit from this? What are the benefits for you?
So I think just services as well as how we operate with our public. So one, we get a lot of calls to 311, and I think the team over there is doing an excellent job. And I say the same thing for the utilities call center as well. But what is not occurring is problem resolution. And so I think what we want to do is be able to streamline our customer service and our responsiveness to our residents. And I think the benefit is not only one, our transparency, because in our office, one thing that we would plan to do is publish those reports of all of the calls that we receive, as well as how we resolve them and within a time frame, so that public dashboard, so folks understand that. I think secondly, we'd be able to increase accountability. Right now, if I'm John from 311 and I call a particular department to resolve an issue, again, you know, that department is listening to John, who's tied to central services, and no disrespect there, but that's a department head and all of them are counterparts. Elevating that responsibility to the administrator's office not only connects it to me, but it connects it to all of you. And so everybody knows the commission doesn't play the radio, so let's make sure we resolve these issues.
Well, thank you. Well, I've been in support of it, doing it that way for quite some time, and I'm just glad to see you coming forward with that. Thank you.
Mr. Frannum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. My first question is, have all these things that we've looking at today, have they been discussed with department heads?
To a certain extent, yes, not all of them though. I think first, you know, while department heads should have input, and some of these things we have discussed to a certain level, we start with the commission and then we implement your will. And so going back to maintenance, I think you know all of that has been discussed with the department heads, but where it should sit and all of those things, you give feedback before and then we work with them. On 311, absolutely, that's been discussed with both. The proposal is actually crafted by the department head.
Yeah, and I 100% support what you want to do here. My only other question was on the American Rescue Funds. I know we keep talking about them. Would they be used for the option 1 and 2 to fix the facilities only? Is that kind of where the money be used?
Because you can, when you adjust the air quality, the configuration to make sure people are spaced out appropriately, and those types of adjustments makes it allowable cost. And so, yes, the proposal would be to do that that way. My
last question is, do you have an estimate on what the additional revenue might be with the proposal that you want to do underneath the administrative office?
Not
like the additional
yet.
Cost?
Not yet, but it is projected to be minimal. That is, and those would be those one-time costs that we talked about.
I think most of us are in favor of this, so thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All good? Next section.
All righty. So proposed priority pay and class adjustments, and I don't know why that's misspelled, but related to infrastructure. So when we look at our departments, specifically Augusta Engineering as well as the Utilities Department, there are some challenges there that we've got to make sure that we correct. So when we do our comparison, and so in short, the agreement and our understanding is that we would leverage the American Rescue Plan, which you've already approved, and I'll spend some time on that on the next section, so I would ask that we not dive too deep into that, to help take us to competitive rates for our entry-level positions, meaning that there's no one left making $9 an hour or whatever it is. Those funds are supplemented with American Rescue Plan dollars, and that supplement effectively brings us to $15 an hour, and then we would work to keep us at $15 forevermore. That should be crystal clear. I think we all understand that. And then in this upcoming year, the agreement is also that we would have a pay and class study that would help us permanently right-size government as a whole. But there are certain areas that, and the three of them that we'll talk about today, Augusta Engineering and the Utilities Department and the Sheriff's Department, are areas that we have to look at now at this time and figure out how to address them through the budget process, post-budget, and moving into FY22. Now, this request that I'm going over related specifically to engineering and utilities did not come through the budget process, and in coordinating with those two entities, they don't believe that we have to have it as a part of transition, but as you make your big picture decisions, you've got to be aware of what the challenges are. And so this portion of the presentation just highlights that. The first piece is, this is just a snapshot, and again, we're talking illustration purposes, but this is a direct comparison. But the next two slides, illustration purposes. So that is, so we have enough time to kind of think through it and fix our house. So when you compare Columbia County and Augusta Utilities, there's a pretty strong distinction in what we pay versus others. And so many of the differences are about an average of about $10,000 per position. That's pretty significant. That would make, certain people leave one organization to another, especially when you don't have to actually move your home to be able to go and work for those other organizations. And what we know about Augusta Utilities and what we know about Augusta Engineering is that those are highly skilled positions, so it's not easy to fill them. So right-sizing those positions on the front end is very important, not just to attract the appropriate staff, but to retain our existing staff. And we've had some significant losses here recently that we want to make sure that we mitigate. And so this is just an illumination that shows that the adjustments, and we've got to have time to really review this a little bit more, but in this illumination, we would be able to leverage certain things like TIA and potentially stormwater or others. These are just areas that we're looking at where there are external funds that are available for the foreseeable future to help offset any changes to the pay and compensation plan. And so proposal from Augusta Engineering, but we've got to vet it a little bit more in communicating with Director Malik. We worked up a similar presentation for Augusta Utilities. Again, some of these we have not fully vetted these, so we're using them as illumination purposes because the big picture is we've got to identify how to correct it, but we believe that we'll be able to do so through those other significant activities without raising our budget levels and our costs significantly. And so as we're making other budget decisions, we're considering these because I think in speaking with Director Malik as early as this morning, some of those things could come back post-budget approval or in January. And so, but it is important to know that the pay and class plan, and I'll talk about that later, but the pay and class plan would begin this year. They'll make a recommendation. The following year, you might implement it, and so that process could be lengthy depending on the decisions of the commission, but these two areas cannot wait.
Commissioner Hassan.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Administrator, just for the record, I think you did say it. I want some clarity. I'd like to get some clarity around it, please. When it comes to the utilities and the engineering, and I heard you say that they said there's some posts and there's something we can do for the next year's budget. But as I understand it, there are some immediate needs in terms of that. So how do we rectify immediate needs? Because they're bleeding people right now at the tune of that $10,000 difference there. That's so right. Is there anything that you're going to ask of us to try to assist them right now? Because in speaking to them, they're saying they're losing some real quality people right now.
That's right, and they are. And so, again, I think this item, I am not certain because it did not come through the budget process where we would have already incorporated increases, decreases, et cetera. Since it did not come through that process, we're going to attempt to incorporate it into our October 19th delivery, but it might be one of those areas that we have to adjust prior to the November 19th budget adjustment, or as a special item that we make changes within this budget and then amend the FY22 budget. And so this is simply providing that notice while we figure it out.
Yeah, so, but with all that being said, and you did say you gave about 3 or 4 scenarios there. So, but with all that being said, but isn't right now to making those modifications, to making those presentations, the best way to give, if we don't want to do it all, just to give some of the ones who are watching and waiting to see what's going to happen, to be able to take care of 2 or 3 of them right away, so they'll know that we are serious about it, not just sitting there and watch them walk out the door.
Yeah, and we wouldn't need a decision on that. So I'll just use an example. Somebody makes $100,000. There's a $10,000 difference. They have an offer that takes them above that. Well, that's less than the 15%. Wouldn't take an action of the commission because that's within my authority, and we would resolve that. If there's a group that's negatively impacted, as I'm kind of illuminating here, then we have to do it either through the FY22 budget or through my submission, or during that lag time that we have between October 19th and your adoption of the budget. Even if it's not adjusted then, once you pass the budget, you could address it and immediately adopt it as well. So it may take all of those things, which is why you need to know that now, which is why I'm bringing it to you.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure we don't, the men and women don't lose confidence in it, as though we don't care. And I hear you saying, well, commissioners, that if it's something up to 14.99, and I think it's a worthwhile effort, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take care of that.
Done, absolutely. And so to make it clear, because I'm hoping that those folks are watching now, and so I was going to say this once we got to that last section, but the commission has done some things to make sure we reward and retain staff that actually isn't being done anywhere else in the country, versus putting all of our rescue plans out on the street or fulfilling our internal house later on down the line like most folks are doing. You have given the largest public safety raises. You've expanded essential personnel and added in, basically every part of government to receive some one-time bonus. And then those folks that are even on marginal pay raises have been supplemented to where they're above $15 an hour and eliminated compression temporarily. So the commission has made a humongous statement that we want to retain and invest in our staff today and not tomorrow. This, for those 2 areas that need that additional attention, the statement here today is make the commission aware the administrator has every intent to resolve those issues ASAP, yesterday, not today and not tomorrow, and to make sure we have the support of the commission, we're notifying you. And it sounds like y'all are also telling those same people watching that we got your back and we're going to get this taken care of no matter what we have to do.
Right.
All right, you good, Commissioner? All right, Mr. Frano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. My first question is this pay in class study. I mean, we just did one in this government. Like, what's the reason we got to do another one this quick? And I mean, we still 300,000 or 400,000 again to do one.
Well, I don't think it should take that amount of money, but I would tell you that the environment has also changed. So, one, based on COVID, the competitiveness and the availability of a skilled workforce has been diminished. 2, I don't know what happened with the last pay in class study. I wasn't here, but it didn't work. Throughout the government, we've got some folks underpaid, which is why y'all had to make the courageous step to bring folks up to a reasonable amount of money. But then secondly, throughout the organization, both at the top and the bottom and everywhere in between, is kind of disjointed. And so since I've been here, that's the one conversation that we have continuously had and we've continuously worked on together. I think we looked at that. We did a quick review for our directors, remember? We looked at it for, even engineering and some of the others, and we've done some quick fixes, but throughout the organization, we're not right-sized. And so if the commission does not want to move forward in that way and we piecemeal it, I will follow your lead. But my recommendation is to get it right and do a comprehensive study and get it done based on this new environment.
Yeah, it just feels like we're kind of doing it without a study, to be frank with you. I mean, if you look at this department right here, which I applaud the effort of the two directors to come together with this, their funding, what they want to do, how they're going to do it. And, you know, I 100% support this, and I bet there's probably consensus up here to support this plan in front of us. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the money aspect. If we're fixing each department and going through it and looking at what our colleagues to, you know, the other counties doing, is the need to spend that kind of money on a study again, you know, worth it? But mainly just want to say that 100% on the screen. I'm ready to move forward with what is on the screen. As Commissioner Hassan said, we got to retain and keep the best people. And just think this is a great plan here up on the screen. So thank you.
All right. Commissioner Mason, you said you had one question.
Yeah, I might have 2 or 3, but I can't be limited to any particular amount of questions, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. But no, I do want to go back to the previous page. I think it would be page 15, if we would. Yes, right here. Just for clarity, as I'm looking at this comparison here, is there a reason why on the Columbia County side it starts at 10 as far as the grade and ours is at 1? Is that just a typo, or you see where it says 10 and there's 31?
I think it's just the difference between our pay and class plan.
Okay, so theirs is a 10 and ours is a 1. Is that what we're saying?
I believe that's correct for the like positions also. So
okay, I wanted to make sure I cleared that up because it could be misconstrued.
Oh, got it. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
You classify them completely different. So your pay and class plan is based off of whoever did yours. Theirs based off of another. But the positions might be the same, but they're in different pay and class plans. And so that's why the director did an apples to apples comparison, which of course we could have just left the grades off and showed the money, because that's the real piece that I think you would care about.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I just want to make sure we brought that out and make sure that was real clear.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You got 2?
No.
Oh, you do? Mr. Garrett?
There's consensus.
Yes, I was going to call for consensus on implementing this plan.
Consensus?
Yes, sir.
Hang on a second. Mr. Hassan?
But I definitely want to make sure. You got your mic on? I'm sorry. They don't want to hear what I got to say anyway. The mic won't even come on.
You had it on, sir. Hit it. There you go.
I'm talking Dennis mic. It ain't working. Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure when we talk about, you know, the utilities and what's called, Mr. Administrator, if we possibly could separate it out from the budget for long term and try to get them to what they need immediately, because they're losing some good people right now.
And I think I think I understood that as how
Okay.
y'all are saying to address it. Make it a priority.
Hang on. Can't hear the administrator. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think I'm clear. You know, it is a priority. Everybody shares that, and we are looking to take care of it outside of the budget process before, if possible. But regardless of what that process is, let's get this done.
All right, we got a
Very clear.
consensus, so let's move to the last section.
Got it. All right. So because there are some questions about the American Rescue Plan and how you would be able to utilize that to fill in some of your budget gaps. So the first thing is, I think for the public discussion on these items, the American Rescue Plan is a one-time resource, and there are a lot of consideration, as we can just see today. While we may be able to maintain, or while we will be able to maintain some of the ongoing costs, those startup costs, whether it be reconfiguration of facilities or contracts or consulting, whatever those activities are, those costs are really way outside of our budget. But also because they are tied to the pandemic, those one-time costs could allow us to resolve some of those issues. And so I wanted to make sure we're talking about those and looking at them, so before the budget comes, you understand our philosophy in carrying it out and what is necessarily required. So some of the areas that we're looking at is you've got a new judicial circuit and you've got case backlogs, and those case backlogs are tied directly to COVID. The second piece is we have a streetlight deficit, but in addition to the streetlight deficit, we've got some infrastructure needs that cause public safety hazards. I know we talked about it in the streetlight committee, and while everybody is not a part of the streetlight committee, we did highlight what Atlanta's doing with their whole Light Up Atlanta initiative, leveraging their American Rescue Plans to kind of take care of some of those infrastructure needs. In addition to that, we have the transit deficit. That is one that you filled the gap with the CARES Act last year, and we will likely be filling that gap with the American Rescue Plan this year. But you also have reduced revenues where you can transfer those losses into revenue recovery that actually adds to your general fund. And then again, we just mentioned, and I wanted to highlight the retaining and attracting employees with the current efforts that you've already had, public safety and premium pay. But we also have to look at the sheriff's office retention plan, as well as the overall pay and class study, to make sure we get it right and we're not forced to piecemeal this and identify issues within the budget, adding additional stress. So the first piece is when you look at the judicial expenses and your case backlogs, not only have the case backlogs been fairly significant, the split happened in the middle of the year. And so you've got some of those one-time costs that you have to carry, as well as just the new formula. I think we supported the overall piece of the split, but the legislators actually went in a little bit of a different direction in how they coordinated. And so we have to eat some of those costs, while other costs we actually have reduced when we look at the judiciary. So one key thing, though, and when we talk about, moving in perpetuity, there has been no adjustment in the authorized positions, which is a curveball that was placed in the law that was not supported by any of the three entities, but the state decided to make whatever decision they wanted to. Also, because these activities are related to COVID-19 mitigation, we do have some relief over the next 3 years. So in looking at those, I think the street light is the first one that I wanted to kind of attack. So we've got an annual deficit of $750,000. We know that, and so we already identified that in 2020, that larger deficit that you had, we erased through the use of fund balance. But in addition to that, during our discussions and the coordination related to the streetlight deficit, we looked at resolving those FY 2021 issues through the American Rescue Plan, which gives you the opportunity to continuously vet those recommendations and make a rate adjustment at some point in FY 22, but doing so at the earlier part of the year, which would be March, would likely be helpful.
I've got something I have something I want you to look at when you get a chance.
Okay, yes, sir. And so with that being the case, if we were to address some of those infrastructure issues that we know come with the expansion of streetlights, because it is a public safety initiative, that is one option, similar to Atlanta, where we would be able to have a proactive resolution to infrastructure. And so I'll stay there just for 1 minute when we think about the rescue plan and what the proposal is, just to make sure we're clear. We can resolve this year's deficit as well as invest an approved upon amount into our infrastructure, our streetlight infrastructure, and add some lighting and also add some value to our residents. But those things would not be sustainable in making those investments or resolving the deficit because those funds do run out. And so those rate structure adjustments that you are reviewing and you discussed previously do require some action at some point in 2022. Otherwise, you would continue to carry that deficit and not be able to improve your infrastructure.
Questions? Are you finished, pretty much?
Well, with the street lighting portion, if you wanted to do it section by section, you could, but I think going through it all, you'd be able to tie it together and get all of your.
Just go ahead.
Okay. So with the transit deficit, I mean, that's not a new item either, and we do receive a grant that really provides some great support to our residents. We're definitely moving forward on improving the fleet with these electronic buses, and I think we've seen the innovation from Director Daughtery in managing the service with very little resources. But our model is that of a true public benefit, meaning that the fares do not come close to meeting the expenses. And so that is something that we carry every year. And so those fares generate less than 10% of the total expenses. And so in the same manner that you would offset the cost of transit for this year, as we look at the American Rescue Plan, unless we're changing our model, until we bring in additional grant funds and some of those other things that we need to invest in, a key portion of the American Rescue Plan would be to fill in that public transit benefit based on those allowable costs related to that. Now, some of these I'm also bringing to your attention because we put together a framework for the rescue plan, but we haven't brought back a full plan, one, because of the rules, but then second, you're not able to project what holes you have to fill out, and the commission was pretty clear, before we make decisions on that, let's get our house in order first. And so that's what we're planning to do here through the budget process. And so again, the 2021 cost of $3.2 million is covered through the CARES Act. That same amount will need to be covered and projected through 2022, leveraging the American Rescue Plan. In addition to that, there are other budget gaps. I think I talked about revenue recovery and some of the rules and allowances through the rescue plan that we can utilize. Just want to highlight, some of those challenges and how we project, because in previous stops, we used to always say governments don't have cash problems, they have cash flow problems. When you receive your money impacts how you coordinate your expenses. So here, we receive our revenues for our franchise fees in March. As you in a time like COVID, it's hard to project. I'd imagine for the last 10 years, your revenues have been pretty good, always going up when it comes to franchise fees, but COVID kind of threw us for a loop and we didn't realize it until March. So that's a gap that we weren't expecting. In FY 2021, that gap was $1.5 million. We're gonna let's say overestimate our expenses this year and assume, even though we're returning to normal and we have an open posture, we are projecting that those revenues will also be down in FY 22 as well, but we really won't know until March. What is likely to happen is that those numbers are not significantly down to 1.5, which means come March of 2022, it would be a candidate for a mid-year budget amendment, so some unexpected costs can be resolved. And so finally, we'll get to the section of employee retention, which is important because I think we only talked about those two departments, But again, we've got to look at this thing globally, because not only the 16 departments that report to me, but also those elected officials and constitutional officers. So one, some of the issues or some of the major issues around pay for fire were resolved based on the American Rescue Plan, raising up that limit and being able to move our firefighters up through those supplements. So thank you to the commission for allowing us to do that and resolving that. And over the next couple of months, weeks and months, we're going to keep notifying our firefighters, because it's a lot of information to take in. I'm getting a lot of questions, and I don't even think people throughout the organization realize that you've already resolved some of these issues. The second part about that, though, is we also have received a request from the sheriff's office, which I thought was a thoughtful request, but it is a fairly large amount of money, I think, and I'll go into it shortly, but we've got to look at how we resolve some of their issues, because they also are having some retention challenges, or at least they're trying to head off retention challenges. And then again, we talked about the pay and class adjustment, so you guys beat me to it on your conversation. We've got to make some interim adjustments, and we've got to make sure that we get that pay and class plan correct. So when we look at the sheriff's office request, which I will spend some time on, thank you, which I will spend some time on, the request from, so the first thing is, again, and I want to make sure we do this because we're getting a lot of questions. The public safety and premium pay provisions in the American Rescue Plan took a lot of work for us to kind of figure that out. And so everyone essentially receives something, because we're getting calls from people saying that they were left out. They are not. The law allows you to give a very high tier for what's considered traditional law enforcement. The easiest way to explain it, and I am oversimplifying it, but that's police and fire. All of them are able to receive that public safety pay. But there's some nuances in which we created to deliver premium pay to make sure, since Augusta has been open, folks haven't been able to use vacation. They had a lot of challenges, and I don't think our departments or our staff really understand what you did on their behalf. So I know we're taking a while, but this I think is important, and we want to make sure we get it on the record. And this is one of those things that we want our newspaper folks to run and tell that to everybody who will listen. First thing is they'll get 3 opportunities and 3 checks. So because they did not get to take vacation, there was a COVID leave balance. Our folks have been working around the clock on behalf of our residents, and so there's a liability that was placed on the government. We had to eat all of those costs to get it off of our books, which is good financial advisement and great financial practices, thanks to Director Williams. We're actually offloading that piece, but we're giving it to our staff members. So we're paying out their COVID annual leave. So that is a benefit that they receive. That's a really big deal, because we're rewarding them for not taking time off and working for our residents around the clock. So they should know that. It's in the FAQs, but everybody didn't quite understand it. Then after that, we're coming back, and without any, and while I think we've got extraordinary leadership in our police, fire, marshal, sheriff, however you want to classify it, but the commission, without that input, said, hey, how do we reward our public safety folks? What can we do? And so they all are receiving that one-time bonus that is allowable through the law. That's a second check. But then once we get past that, we begin to implement separately that premium pay addition that raises those who are under the minimum wage to of $15 an hour, effectively making through that supplement our minimum wage $15 an hour, and giving those staff a commitment that when those funds run out, we will carry that in perpetuity. So I just wanted to make sure I stated that on the record, because that's us being proactive in retaining our employees. Everyone doesn't watch these meetings. They all didn't read the FAQs, but those folks will just get a surprise benefit and bonus that they don't know is coming. But I've heard some things that make it negative and folks being left out. Listen, that's crazy, and that's not the case. So that's not necessarily for y'all because you know it, but that's for the public and for everybody else to understand. And so I'll move on from that. Second, when we look at the sheriff's request, he did go through the process. While we asked everyone to submit a flat budget, his request is actually not necessarily flat, but it is to make sure that on the personnel side that they are retaining their staff and appropriately compensating and able to compete. So his request is for an additional $3.2 million in personnel costs. In addition to that, though, which I think might get lost, is that there's also $1.2 million in continuing capital costs that we have to carry. And so that makes that total request about $4.4 million. Now, I know some folks can look at, and I'm sorry, I just left this off. For our public safety folks, we're also going to be, and is on the agenda, applying for that additional $1,000 from the governor's office, which is actually taking those benefits up a little bit more. Didn't want to lose that because I think that's important for our staff. But his cost, which they benefit from, which is why I tied that in there, his cost, that total request is about $4.4 million. Now, it is my intent to honor that request and cover all of those. But right now, I am not certain that we can do that in the transmitted budget. So I don't want that to be misconstrued or us saying that we're not looking to support our public safety folks or any of that. It is just, again, you get to adjust the budget as you go through. You get to make a lot of different adjustments. And so what you see on October 19th, even what you adopt on November 19th, your budget is a living, breathing document. You have made budget adjustments at least 7 times in this year, so we want to make sure that folks understand that. So my proposal and what I'm looking at now would be to honor the sheriff's request at about $3 million as we go through the process, $2.2 million of that going to personnel and $800,000 of that in capital. Now that's what my recommendation is going to be and what we would likely allocate, but he may want to do it differently once we talk. He may have some additional vacancies that he may want to freeze for the first quarter. He may have some operational costs that he can do without with for the first quarter, and then we agree to bring those back, leveraging, let's say, the franchise fees in March or things of that nature. So I think I wanted to make sure that I highlight it because I know public safety is always a sensitive topic, and one we need to be extra transparent about is that the intent is to resolve those issues, but how we do it to have a balanced budget, this is likely going to be my proposal. And so I wanted to make sure that the commission, the public, the sheriff, and everybody else was aware of that. Separately, I won't dive too much into these because we've kind of beat that horse to death. But of course, we have increased our minimum wage by default. We are leveraging that supplement, adding it to folks' pay, and bringing them above the $15 minimum wage in line with the law and our public plan. This impacts us countywide. And so when we make these evaluations, we've now increased the competitiveness for the Augusta Fire Department by the adjustments that we've made. We've just got to make sure that our staff members understand what we've done because they may think they're making more somewhere else, but they'd actually be making less based on the adjustments that you've made. In addition to that, we've got to look at the Sheriff's Office retention plan so that we can continue to be competitive. But all of these decisions, again, I believe, and I always defer to the commission, but I believe that if we continue to make these piecemeal decisions and we don't look at it globally, we are now making immediate decisions that we've got to carry on through perpetuity. Regardless of what the decision the commission makes, because it's your decision, the budget that I transfer to you will be my advisement, and it would not put a burden in perpetuity that the government could not sustain, in my opinion. But you represent more than 200,000 people, and if your wisdom says we have to carry these things out now, and we are going to ask you to make these adjustments and task you with delivering in spite of, we're going to get that done. And so in that process, I just wanted to make sure that we highlight that, and we know that every decision we make has a cost. And so with that, I'll take your questions on that section.
Mr. Frandon,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I guess mine are more requests for next budget
Yep.
and statements as well as questions, frankly. There's been talk that the street light funding was cut after 2014 from 1.8, 1.6 to 1.1, 1.8, something like that. And I would like to understand if that happened and why it happened, because I feels like, I've heard from other department heads that it was cut. Finance might say it's not cut. Like, I think it's time that we frankly have that conversation on the floor, whether it was cut or not, because we didn't have a gap until that. And so I think that it's time that we have that conversation publicly. So if we could bring that answer back next budget session, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Mr. Administrator.
I'm not asking for it now. Okay, I'm not asking for it now. I'm asking for it next time.
I just want to make sure, because I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you how we're going to resolve
Yeah.
it. So give me 1 second.
Okay.
I'll tell you when we bring it back and how.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got one more.
You got three more questions.
No, I got one more
You
state.
can ask one for Brandon because he left.
I'm not asking anymore. I'm not done yet.
No, I said you're going to your second question. He said he's listening.
He's listening?
He said he's listening.
Ms.
Okay.
Bonner, she gonna test that.
All right, I'll keep going then. My next question is the old city versus the county taxes. I think that it's over time that we fix this, because if you look at what the old city and people that live in that area are paying in taxes versus what the county's paying, it's not the same. Frankly, it's time for this government to make it all one. And my question is, can you bring us this answer? Why is it this? Now, I might be wrong when I state this, but this is why I'm asking. In 2011, taxes in the old city were around 16 million, and today they're around 10 million. Mm-hmm. And I want to understand why, when we've grown, there's $6 million money less coming in the old city. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's, again, next year we're going to have this conversation publicly of trying to get this government out of paying two different, because we hear it all the time, the old county bails out the city, that sort of thing. And it's time that we all be fair across the board, across this county. So those are my requests, I guess, for the next
Got it. And I'll tell you how we'll bring those back. So one, I think you and I have had that conversation, and so I clearly, I think I clearly agree that it's almost as if consolidation is not complete. And so kind of what you're saying is, how do you do that? I think you also have that tax cap, which kind of keeps you separate too, and folks are afraid of it, but that's because they don't know that it's kind of stopping that completion of consolidation. So I think those are great conversations to have. I do think we got to have those outside of the budget conversation, though, because they're a little complex. I mean, the big picture stuff.
Well, and I guess the reason I brought them up is because we're talking about American Rescue filling gaps. Well, are there really gaps there? Why did some of these things happen, and do we need to fix what we did? That's the reason I brought it up.
No, I'm saying I agree with you, but I think in the budget transfer or the budget transmittal and adoption, I don't think you would have time to fully resolve those. And so I think yes, but we would have to really kind of focus on those as an FY22 exercise. And again, you authorize the strategic plan. We've got to bring some of those next steps. They're doing initial research, but some of that, how we fix that could likely be coordinated through the strategic planning process. As far as your first question for streetlights, because we are looking, you saw my plan on that and how we would temporarily resolve that. during the transmittal letter, because we don't have, remember, most of your meetings with departments and where we would bring this stuff back happens after the administrator's transmission and through the budget deliberations. So we would include it in the transmittal letter and answer your question, but then also if there are additional follow-ups and things of that nature, we would do it through that November 4th through the 8th time frame that's in the budget calendar. So that's how we'll bring that back. And then your second question, I think we agree that we would need to resolve that long-term issue following the budget process.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hassan,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
They
Mr. Administrator, I
said-
got a couple of questions for you, if
no,
you
they
don't
said you
mind.
have one. Ms. Scott said you have one question.
You the chair on this one, Commissioner Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Administrator, in terms of, you had up earlier, much earlier on the screen, when you was talking about Columbia County and Richmond County in terms of engineering service and utilities. In terms of what the sheriff wants to do, I'm not saying he's asking to meet them dollar for dollar. And maybe we have seen it, but have you seen the money he's asking for, what he intend to pay his deputies or his patrol personnel?
He included that. Now I haven't done and staff does a lot of this, but I haven't done the direct look from how it compares to Columbia County versus, Richmond versus Columbia and what this would take us to. I think my point is that, and I'm trying to stay within the parameters that is the Augusta way, is that with constitutional officers, you allocate their budget and then you allow them to spend it as they please. And so what is in my limited authority is to evaluate the overall dollar amount and its impact on our budget. I think
you kind of lose that, Mr. I hear that, but I kind of disagree because you're using the word retention. So if you're using the word retention, we are talking about for salary specifically, so we should know what that looks like. Because you're using the word for retention purposes.
Understood.
Yeah.
Listen, if that's the will of the commission, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
But I think my point in that is, if we're going to have an $806 million budget and we're trying to stay flat, but through some of the revenue recovery, we may be able to offset those costs and bring in an additional, let's say, $5 to $6 million, right? If we can, that's limited. If we're only going to do that for about $6 million, well, we couldn't give 3.2 to the sheriff's office and then resolve the issues with engineering, utilities, the downtown maintenance, and everything else. It's got to be equitable. But they have a need, and public safety is one of y'all's top priorities. I'm looking at your 6 here, and public safety is one of those. And so we want to make sure to meet your priorities, all of the departmental requests, and still have a reasonable budget that doesn't have a negative impact on our residents. And so,
You also may mention that in having this conversation, so when you speak with the sheriff, you also may mention that whether he would like to freeze some positions or what have you to get there. So are you saying that if you choose not to do that, then you're going to propose allocating the 3.2 or whatever anyway?
No, sir.
Okay.
So, one, I have not had a conversation with the sheriff about this because I report to the commission and not the sheriff. But the sheriff has allocated, he has made the request. And so we want to make sure that we work to make that request. All of the department heads made requests too, and we try to resolve those as well. But based on where they fall in line on your priorities is how they are on the pecking order. The sheriff's request is one of your 6 priorities, and so that's one of the priorities for which we want to fill. The request, again, is 3.2 for personnel, but you can't forget the 1.2 for the infrastructure because you can't have folks over at the jail not being coordinated and treated appropriately. In a $4.4 million request, unless, again, we've got to fill in $8 million worth of gaps, as well as some of those additional requests to provide that level of service. As we look at those, of that 4.4 million, I'm pretty confident that we can deliver 3 million of that. With that being said, there are options on how we can work with the sheriff to reach his goals within budget. And so if the commission agrees with that approach, that's when I will reach out to the sheriff to talk about his request and work through it before October 19th so that everybody is satisfied.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to say this. Thank you for your hard work on this and what you brought forth and your suggestions and the information that you brought. Looking forward to what we can tear apart on the next presentation. and with that, I suggest and make a motion this meeting be adjourned.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
I have one question. Ms. Scott, what? Oh, I get one question.
Okay.
I did send you that paper,
Yes, sir.
and I said, is this a part of the budget where it has the street light? It's circled on that
Yeah,
paper.
I think in his proposal, and I want to defer to Director Malik on that, this is their proposal, and again, it did come outside of our normal budget process, but it's a priority, which is why I brought it forward. We haven't had an opportunity to fully vet it and identify whether that's the case or not, so I don't want to speak to that yet.
I got you, but I had a couple of commissioners brought it to my attention.
Yeah.
That, it looks like you're taking money from street light to pay down on the budget. Dr. Malik is behind you.
Got it. Yeah.
Y'all give me a couple of minutes, Mr. Hassan. I waited through your 15 questions. Come on, give me a second.
Can you repeat your question?
Well, basically, it looks like you're pulling money from street lights to be money for the budget. That's what they're asking.
Oh, the fund positions?
I guess so. Whatever that $72,000 is right there.
What is he asking? He's asking, is this $72,000?
Mr. Administrator, y'all can bring it back.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll include.
Okay.
Coming out of here.
Okay, but if we got a gap in street light,
Oh, let me answer that now so we don't have to bring it back. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me just answer that so we don't have to bring it back. What he is saying is that in the TIA discretionary funding, you could basically put that money in TIA discretionary and you would be adding those funds back to your street lights.
I got you.
That is what he's presented. Again, finance has got to look at it. We recently received it, been trying to ask staff to be proactive in some of these things, and Director Malik and Director Bond have done so, but that is the intent of the illustration, and we'll vet it, and it'll be included
Let me get to this
as we
real
discuss.
quick. Is transportation, the buses, whatever, are they supposed to receive about 2.3 million this year from TIA or something like that this
I thought
year?
it was about 500,000 in discretionary. I don't remember that amount.
Are they supposed to?
It's in the next one. Got it. Yeah, that's the 2023 allocation, not in this one.
Okay, but right now they receive about 500,000.
I think that's right for discretionary. Isn't it about $500,000? Yep, 500,000.
So my question is, in 2022, 23, or whatever, when the 2.3 million starts, do they still need to receive the 500,000? You don't have to answer that question,
yeah.
but I think engineering's gonna need some money. And,
Well, that's a good point. 'Cause I don't think I see Commissioner Clark, but that question that I was answering earlier when I was saying we're making decisions for 22, knowing that the financial picture changes in 23 in different areas. That's why we're asking for the guidance now, because we can offset those costs and resolve them in year. So your point is right on target, and that's why we had this session today, so that we now have the guidance to make the right decisions where we hopefully present a budget that is easy for you to pass.
Okay. If no other question, adjourn.
Got it.